Hello people, Zach here again today. And today's video is going to be a little bit off topic from the sort of things that I normally talk about. I'm a very technically minded person, so I like to talk about things like math and science, physics, philosophy, coding, sometimes a little bit of economics. But this is going to be a social issue, and it's sort of a black-pilled social issue. But I feel like if you understand the more you understand the topic, the less negative you feel about it. But anyways, let's just go ahead and get into this. The topic that I'm talking about today is marriage, and why I think that marriage is not only dead, but why it's going to be dead for a long time, if not permanently. And for starters, I guess we have to talk about the reason why it exists in the first place. So the contract of marriage exists for a very specific purpose. It's so that the man provides for the woman in return for the woman providing children for the man. Everything else that you want to add to this, all of the sentimentality, the extra clauses or whatever, that's just fluff. That is what I just said is the entirety of the enforced part of what marriage actually is and what it's always been. It doesn't matter which culture you're in. And the thing too is it's not always a monogamous thing. For much of human history, for thousands of years, it was actually the norm that a man had this sort of contract with multiple women. So you would have one man with like multiple wives or concubines, and of course they had their own little pecking order, sort of like hens, the pecking order. But that was the totality of the contract. But the thing too is that although that is the denotation of what's going on, the connotation that is and the nuance here is worth going into. So men, first and foremost, men do not get married to have sex, okay? Especially, if they can get sex before having married, they definitely wouldn't get married to have sex. The reason why they get married is to start a family, and that kind of goes, and, part of a family is like having children, and the reason why men want family is that they want to be able to, instill their own values, and their own beliefs and traditions into their own children, and have a lineage that carries on because they want to be remembered when they're gone. And they also want to be respected within the family. They don't want to be treated like they want to be respected, and they want to be, I guess, somewhat be admired. And who doesn't want to be admired? But there's also they want to have a place of belonging, and I guess you could sort of extrapolate this into 100 different threads. But like I said, the ultimate thing here is that having children is not necessarily the end goal. It's the means by which you get to the end goal, which is that the men want to be able to preserve their spirit. Because the body is going to die. And depending on whatever your beliefs are, the soul, which is to me, it's your ego, it's your mind, it's what makes you you, that's also going to die as well. But the spirit, which is the things that you stand for, the values you have, those things can be passed on, and so in a sense, you live on through your own lineage. And so when we live in a society that makes it to where men are separated from their children, even though the society still enforces the terms of the contract, that if the man has women with if the woman provides children for the man will provide for the woman, at least for 20 years. Even though that particular part of the contract is still enforced, the man is not actually getting what they want in the terms of a divorce. Because having the children was just the means to the end. The ends was to have a family, to have lineage, to have heritage, to have a long line of people, to be remembered, to all of this. And so the inverse aspect of this, I guess, as well, is to also talk about what women are getting out of the relationship. And so historically, it was about being provided for, and this was because prior to the existence of industrialization and capitalism making the standard of living so high and easily accessible to the average person, people had to do everything themselves. They had to make their own houses. They had to make their own. They had to grow their own food. They had to slaughter their own animals, make their own clothes. And like there's sometimes you could have some trading between individuals. It's not like marketplaces and stuff didn't exist, but there's also like self-defense aspect. Like if you're living in a homestead and a bear wants to break into the house, someone has to take out the bear. Who's going to stop the robbers? So it's both being provided for, it also being secure. So you can also think of it in terms of security. But because we live in a society today that's benefited from industrialization, and capitalism has made it so easy for people to have access to things, to goods and services that throughout much of human history wouldn't even have been accessible to kings. And because the jobs that exist within modern society to maintain this system have made it such that men and women are ultimately interchangeable for the most part, the incentives that women have for the contract no longer exist. So, I guess circling this back around, you see that the incentives for both people have been eliminating. Like the incentive that men had to start a relationship is gone, and the incentive that women had to enter the relationship is also gone. And so if their incentive is gone, why would they want to have marriage anymore? And so the reason why, I guess to talk about this a little bit more, the purpose of being provided for, if you want to put it that way, or saying being secure, the baseline of that is survival. And then once you've taken care of survival, the next step above that is luxury. And of course, luxury is about comfort, but it's also about wealth and being able to show off your wealth to others, to show how well off you are. And so the incentive that women has is shifted now to where it's no longer about being provided for, it's about this luxury aspect. And because there are so few men in society who have a large enough income in order to provide that sort of luxury, much of women are fighting over like the top 5% of men. And it's not just the luxury aspect as well, because like I said, luxury, one of the purposes of luxury is in order to show off to other people around you. And women tend to be socially minded creatures, which means they tend to be more into being engaged in this dynamic of fighting for social roles. And so they also want to have like a trophy man. Like they don't just want the man who can provide the lap of luxury, they also want a man who they can show off to other women as being better than. And of course, like I said, this is all within like the top 5% of men. And because these men have so many options, there's so many women are competing for the same top 5% of men, these top 5% of men, they have no reason to settle. And especially if they're younger and they just want to screw it, have kids, like they can have as much sex as they want because like the sexual revolution has made that easily accessible. And also, if they ever did settle down, they kind of endanger their own finances, which would eliminate their own situation. So, like I said, the incentive structures are gone, but also, like I mentioned, the sexual revolution has made it socially acceptable for people to have sex before marriage, and also to, I guess the creation of the internet has also made porn easily accessible, and a lot of people will harp on that particular issue, but I think that that's actually less of an issue than the promiscuity issue. Because yes, pornography can lead to like addictions, but I don't think that there's any strong evidence to say whatsoever that the observation or usage of pornography actually has any damaging effects on pair bonding. Because like men are very what's the term I'm looking for? With men, there's a separation within the mind between the partner that they're between emotional connection and sexual connection. I guess that'd be the best way to put it. I was trying to find a good way to put it, but there's a separation, a very clear separation within the male mind between the sexual and the emotional. Whereas with women, this line tends to be very blurred. The sexual tends to be more like more intertwined with the emotional, and so like. There's that aspect of it, but like going back to the promiscuity thing. The issue with pair bonding, I guess you have to kind of go with this by an analogy. If the only dessert you ever had was banana pudding, and you were asked what your favorite, or like it was banana pudding or graham crackers, if that was the only two desserts that you've ever had, and anyone ever asked you what your favorite dessert would be, you would most obviously be answering banana pudding. But if you've also had chocolate volcano cake, and you've had Reese's peanut butter ice cream, and you've had gummy worms, and you've had sorbet, and you've had like all of these different desserts, like just hundreds of different desserts, and someone were to ask you what your favorite dessert was, you would have a very difficult time perhaps trying to answer this particular question, because you have so many frames of reference, and there's so many small things that one thing has an advantage over another. And so you would have a hard time trying to decide which one you liked, because like maybe you want banana pudding today, but tomorrow you want chocolate volcano cake. And so if someone said, well, like what would be the best dessert ever? You might try to think of this like a concoction, where like, well, I really love chocolate ice cream, and I really love banana pudding, and I really love that. What happens if I just mashed all of these things together? Wouldn't that be the best thing ever? But the thing is that one is, not only does that kind of dessert not already exist, but it would actually be disgusting if you ever had it. And so this is a long-winded analogy to kind of go around to the fact that when you've had, the more experience that you had, the more frames of reference you have, and so the more discontent you happen to be with the things that you have when you have them. You wouldn't... If you've never experienced luxury, you wouldn't feel bad about not having it, I guess is another way to put it. Let's kind of simplify it a bit. So, ultimately what promiscuity is doing is that it's eliminating people's ability to pair bond with individuals. And so for the first few months, maybe for the first few years, I would not say any further than maybe 5 to 8 years, which is about how long the initial like puppy love aspect of this lasts. After that period of time is up, and the butterflies are gone, they're going to be wanting something else, and they're going to be searching for something else. And we live in a day and age where like the internet has made it very easy to cheat. Like it's made it easily accessible to everyone. So like, I guess kind of circling back around and answering all of these things, like the incentives are gone. The promiscuity has eliminated people's ability to pair bond. It's easier to cheat now than it ever was before. And it's not just that, but it's also been weaponized, because like I said, the contract of marriage is still enforced even after a divorce occurs, because like I said, the child support system is more or less asserted the fact that when there's a separation, the women almost win child support cases almost all of the time, like almost 100% of the time. And they're almost always awarded child support. So if the woman provides a child for the man is on the hook for being able to provide for the women. But the law does not enforce the companionship or the family aspect, which is what men are actually looking for. So the contract has basically become like a weapon, where like you can steal half of someone's wealth and then enslave them for many years, like 18 years. So it's a weaponized thing as well. And there's so many different threads that you can kind of go out on this, but that's more or less the gist of the whole situation here. And the only way that you could possibly even begin to attempt this is that you would have to revert to a society that has a much lower standard of living, and we would have to undo the sexual revolution, and that would be like the necessity for being able to return this. And like you could also add on top of this as well, like trying to roll back women's rights and stuff, but like that's kind of like tangential to it, because I don't feel like that actually addresses the... I feel like if you did that alone, it would not solve the issue. You would have to, like I said, you'd have to completely roll back the entire standard of living by several hundred years in order to get things to a point where the idea of marriage itself is even appealing anymore. And this is why I said I don't think that... I think that marriage is dead, and that it's going to be dead for a very long time. Now, there's certain things that we could do to try to make it more appealing. Like, you can argue that there's certain policies that can be put in place to try to create more incentives for people to engage in these particular contracts, and then also trying to remove government's intervention in such a way that the fallout from this doesn't happen. But even if you did this, like if you made it more, the contract more appealing, the ways that you would make it more appealing would also guarantee that the contract isn't actually effectively enforced. It's just more like, oh, you're staying together as long as you want to stay together, and when you split, you each go your own ways, and neither of you owes anything. In which case, what's the purpose of even having the contract in the first place? So, like I said, it's not that we can't do certain things that would make it more appealing, but the things that we would do to make it more appealing would undermine the reason why the contract exists anyways. So, it doesn't really get us anywhere. And so the result of all of this is that the marriage rates are going down, and the fertility rates are going down. But also, because the fertility rates are going down, the population is decreasing, which means that the economic productivity is decreasing, which means that profits are decreasing. And so, like, all of these countries are around the world are dealing with this particular issue right now. And it all stems from the rise in the standard of living. That is the ultimate cause. Because, if you go to different countries, different countries will still have different gender roles, but this is the one constant. Like, if you look at, doesn't matter which country you're going to, even with countries that have different gender roles, depending on where you're at, and like, some countries are more misogynistic than others, some countries are more misandristic than others, but this is the one constant. The constant is the standard of living being improved in general across the board. And that correlates directly to a decrease in population size. And of course, the way that countries are trying to deal with this is by mass immigration, by trying to replace the existing population and then gaslighting them, acting like they're crazy for thinking that. When it's very obvious that's what they're going to do. Because if they wanted to protect the border, they could absolutely do it. They are choosing not to do it. And they are choosing not to prosecute, when an illegal immigrant or a person who's only been migrated for like the first 2 years or whatever, stabs a 5-year-old to death or something. Like, you ever notice, like, every single time you see a situation where this happens, the response from the government or from the media is to immediately switch it around and say that this will rile up the far right, and so, like, it's not that the child being stabbed to death that was the problem, it's the response to the child being stabbed to death. That's the problem, and that's what they're concerned about, because that means that you're noticing that they're putting you in danger, that your country's not actually serving your benefit. It's not serving you, and that's why they hate nationalism, because nationalism means, serving the people themselves and putting the people first, and that will also mean, of course, being able to control immigration to the extent that people do have job opportunities, and that people do can afford homes because there's not a housing shortage, or and that their culture is preserved, like that they don't have to fear their neighbors, they don't have to fear their children being stabbed, or their pets being eaten, or their apartment complexes being taken over. And there's this constant gaslighting from the media, but it all stems from this one issue. It all stems from this one issue. And so it's just like a thread that just keeps unraveling and unraveling. And so I feel like once you understand the incentives that are in play, and you see like the whole machine for what it is, I feel like that is the first step to being able to try and figure out where you can go. Because like if you don't understand the problem, you can't even begin to try to solve it. And yet it's such a radical idea to even propose the possibility of trying to decrease the standard of living. Like to try to get people back into the mindset of growing their own food, of making their own things, of repairing their own things, and becoming more self-sustainable and decreasing their reliance on the community around them. Deconsumerization, maybe, be a term you could use. And it's not only is just like a monumental feat you would have to do, but it's not an idea that would be popular to many people. It wouldn't even be popular to me. It doesn't matter what gender you are, whatever. It's just not going to be popular. And if you wonder why like 75% of the women are like the only issue they care about is abortion, well, this is your answer. Like the reason why they're fighting for their right to be able to kill their children is because they're being pump and dumped by the men that they're chasing for because they're looking for luxury. And that gap, that gap is shrinking. So, like I said, it's a little bit of a dark topic. I hope this was a little informative. If you have anything interesting you want to have, or if this kind of opened your eyes on a little bit of things, leave some comments below. Appreciate it. Thanks for watching.